when it comes to poverty, how we go about dealing with it as a community, as a nation, and as humanity at large is going to hinge on some philosophical and scientific notions about us and our world. In today's age, as some areas of philosophy are now testable through science and technology, this in turn is changing our philosophies about us and our world. We start to question things like what are morally acceptable solutions regarding issues such as poverty and its underlying issues. One of the notions I want to specifically talk about is the notion of free will. Do we have it? What does it mean? How do we define it? Questions like these have stumped scientists and philosophers for years, but as time and collaboration went on, many feel that we have a clearer view, much clearer view, of what these are today. To boil it down, we first have to need to understand the three basic levels of free will, which is dualism, determinism, and agency. Then from this we can make a decision as to what each say about us and who we are in the world around us. The first level, dualism, is the belief that consciousness and thought are independent from the body and brain, and they were in the past often referred to as a soul. Now this, as far as our scientific understanding on the earth remains, there is just no evidence to support this. This at the same time does not mean that there is no afterlife or anything like that, because science is still very limited in a lot of areas of what it can measure. But any form testable as far as visual, audio, linguistic, creativity, emotional, are pinned to areas in the brain. I mean, we can measure them. If anything is damaged to them, then one of those things leads out, even consciousness. And then we can take, for example, how if somebody has damaged their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that ties their cultural morality, what they learned about morality, to emotional control. And they can literally turn into a sociopath overnight. This can be through being born with this way. This can happen through tumors. This can happen through injuries. But it can drastically change somebody's personality. And so it's things like this that kind of really give notion and credibility to consciousness and thoughts being tied directly to the brain. So essentially, no brain, no nothing, as far as we can measure today in scientific terms. Next, we have determinism. Determinism is the notion that basically everything about us is determined and that there is little to no room for choice. To start with, it at least is partially true, given we can't pick our genetics, the environment we're born and raised into, and the process of cause and effect, meaning each effect is directly tied to the cause before it. So right away, any choice that we may have is limited by things that we have no choice over. Now, some compatibilists, which is a view that free will can still exist within determinism, say that at the level of consciousness, brain, we have a system which allows for us to work within a narrow frame of will. There are some problems with this, though. One, they're limiting the process of cause and effect from the process of the brain. So basically what they're saying is that with any cause, the brain there's a possibility of there being more than one effect. Now, this just hasn't been shown to be true yet, but it also has not been completely ruled out either. Then there are also tests which show that people's subconscious brains make the decisions before we become conscious of them, to the point where the scientists can actually predict what the person will choose with almost 100% accuracy before they choose it. Now, some problems with this, though, is that these are pretty small tasks, like left click or right click, and don't necessarily dive into the deeper depths of what do you want to be when you get older and stuff like that. So there are still some problems with this too. It is possible. It is possible to know. Yeah. Okay. So right now there's this kind of split with this. Both basically scientists and philosophers accept that determinism is in fact logically true in every sense. As far as compatibilists, though, scientists, and when I say scientists, I'm talking about in the areas of psychology and neuroscience, the sciences that have to deal with this kind of subject, they for the most part reject a free will in any sense that we can measure. While philosophers, the majority of them, are compatibilists, that free will can still exist within a form of determinism that we have. Now, the last part is agency. This isn't actually a scientific term or a philosophical term. It's a sociological term. And agency is the term used in sociology, which is very similar to notions of determinism, in that it accepts who we are and the choices we may be able to freely make, or at least bound in many ways for genetics, environment, and how those affect one another in a range of cause and effect. Now we can see this in comparisons with different economic levels. If somebody's born into a higher economic level, they're going to have a lot more choices of the type of schools they go to, as far as getting a better education, going on to get a better career. And then as far as even like food they make, where they're going to have more options as far as getting organic food, healthier foods, compared to somebody in poverty. Those are very limited choices, what they have. So those in poverty are much at higher risk of being zapped of willpower. Now this is intentional power, and even if free will is completely an illusion, willpower can still exist because it's the intentional power, the desire to try to follow something through. And with this in poverty, your circumstances a lot of time, they're a lot more hectic, it's going to drain you a lot more, and it's going to drain your willpower, which from new research and tests show that willpower is a limited source, and it has to be recharged. And so, your genetic disposition on how big your gas tank is affects you, and then your environment on how much it takes out of you. If you're always worrying about groceries or how you're going to pay stuff, this is going to affect your intentional will in a big way. So when it comes to things like to quit smoking or to quit a habit, it's directly going to affect somebody compared to somebody who has a higher income. Studies show that mental energy that is required to make do with scarce resources taxes the brain so much that this, in a sense, perpetuates a cycle of poverty. So basically, that's why we see cycles of poverty so much, is because of stuff like this. What about rags to riches? Well, in a big sense, I'm a kind of rags to riches story. From 14 to 19, I had 14 underage drinking charges, marijuana charge, crack possession. I grew up in this poverty and in and out of institutions. And from that, I have come to a point where I've become fairly highly educated. I'm not rich by any means, but that's a goal one day. But those are rare cases. And sometimes our environments and our genetics interact in a way that bring out the best of us, even like the worst possible situations. So it's, at the same time that's possible, that's not going to work for everybody. It's not going to work out that way. What this ultimately means, though, is that our perceptions of righteous judgment and pride, two things that we could use much trimming, have to be reconsidered in light of the systems at work, both externally and personally. We know by now that whether free will is fully limited or just kind of limited, it is enough that the concepts of like sinners and criminals lose their moral basis for justice that emphasizes just punishment. As far as if you do something wrong, if this way, you're going to be punished, or compared to deterring, rehabilitating, or just merely containing them if there isn't a fix overall. On the other end of those, and so basically what that means is that, as far as instead of, just trying to punish somebody for their wrongdoing or being a certain way, we really just try to deter, find out why they're that way, and change those things. And this is from a systematic approach to just a one-on-one personal approach. It changes the whole system. On the other end of the scale, those of us who work hard and follow the rules kind of lose some of our pride in that we deserve the success that, in a deep sense, when in fact we should feel more lucky that we are kind of the way we are, and that we've been born into the environment we have and the genetics that we have to make us who we are. These things can and should be altered, understood, and changed to incorporate the more compassionate and humble truth of at least a limited free will, that of what the majority of society kind of holds on to. But that's part of the beauty of accepting our fate, so to speak, is that we lose our right to an overinflated ego who wants to be like the righteous judger of others, because they are not our way. They weren't born with our genetics or into our environment. Thank you.